Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the May Lee Show. This is May, as always. Hope you're doing okay. So this episode is starting out the usual way, but then it's going to kind of veer into a different way, unusual way, where it's going to seem like the episode has been piecemealed together, and it's because it has been piecemealed together. And let me explain why. So when I was putting this show together last week, I didn't know I was going to be receiving some pretty big news. And that news came in the form of Forbes 50 over 50 impact list. And I am one of the honorees of this inaugural list. And the main article that came out last week, it says Forbes announces its first ever 50 over 50 impact list, showcasing women over 50 leaving a lasting impact on the world. So I decided to start this episode off with this news because I am stunned. I am flattered. I'm humbled, obviously, by this. And I also wanted to give you some inside information about how this all happened. But let me just read the main article that came out, and then I'm going to read you a portion of another one. So it says, on the heels of its inaugural 50 over 50 list, Forbes today unveils the 50 over 50 impact list, which spotlights women over the age of 50 who are leaving a positive and lasting impact on the world. As part of Forbes' 50 over 50 package, this impact list highlights the exceptional women who found success later in life and are dedicated to creating meaningful and permanent change to make the world a more equitable and diverse place for everyone. The honorees on the list have used their voices and platforms to aid the pandemic recovery, increase gender and racial equity, protect the environment, and serve their communities and the nation as politicians and philanthropic leaders. So needless to say, me getting on this list is just stunning. I am really, I was speechless when I first heard about it. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know that I made this list until I was tagged on a LinkedIn post by a group highlighting and congratulating a few of the women who were featured on this list, including me. So I was just like, what? I don't even know about this. Um, and then another article that's part of this announcement on Forbes, they highlighted a few of the 50 women, like six of us, and they actually used a quote of mine, which blew my mind. So it says in this article, not every one of the 50 women on the list started out intending to work in social impact. May Lee had been a broadcast journalist for most of her career and in 2020 founded the Lotus Media House to focus on telling stories about the Asian and Asian American experience. Then COVID hit and anti-Asian hate crimes began to rise. Lee pivoted the focus of her content speaking out against xenophobia and racism. Quote, "This wasn't planned, this wasn't predicted. But sometimes one is called to do something beyond one's imagination," she says. "That's why I now call myself an accidental activist, a label I wear with honor." So the fact that they quoted me in this like separate article, I mean, my mind was blown already, and then it was blown again. But the reaction from people I know, my friends, family, and beyond, has been overwhelming, and I am so deeply moved by the fact that people are so happy and saying things like you deserve this because you've been working so hard and fighting for our community and yeah, I guess, I mean, for something like Forbes to recognize the work that I am doing and have been doing through blood, sweat, and tears, because believe me, you guys, I mean, there have been times where I wanted to give up because I was so exhausted. I was frustrated. I was depressed. I was sad. I was mad about everything that was happening, but I just kind of just stuck with it. I just said, you know what? Stay the course, May. Stay the course, because what you're doing is meaningful and it's beyond you. It's always been beyond me. It's never been about me. I've never made it about me. And so the recognition, getting this kind of recognition from Forbes is just uh, something that I wasn't expecting, but I'm so, so thankful and grateful. One comment I want to read from a friend of mine who reposted this announcement. And it really, really moved me because I realized that this kind of recognition of women doing this kind of work at after a certain age really resonates in many ways. And so she said, my friend and colleague May Lee made the Forbes list. This is important not just because of what her work means to many Asian American communities, but also the message it sends to all women. Whether you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, when we look up, we need to see women in their 50s, 60s, and beyond being recognized at a time when they have the most wisdom and expertise to offer, because that's our future. The devaluing can start earlier than many realize. After having kids, there's often an immediate shift in how women are seen in the workplace. It can feel scary, terrifying, and we look to the generation above to provide proof that the path ahead will be okay. We don't always get that reassurance, but this list has given me hope. I mean, that I don't need to say anything beyond that, because if that's the impact that something like this has, this 50 over 50 campaign, then hallelujah. Seriously, hallelujah. So that's why this episode is starting this way. So I just wanted to, yes, slightly toot my own horn, but also to say thank you to Forbes, but more importantly, thank you to all of you, the viewers and the listeners and the followers on social media, the supporters who have been cheering me all along the way, who have been intrigued, who have been motivated, inspired. Without your support, without your help, without your encouragement, I would have given up a long time ago. No doubt, no doubt. So this honor, I share with you. Seriously. I feel like I'm giving like some sort of award speech right now. So I'd like to thank my family and my friends and all the, yeah. Seriously though, I really mean it. Okay. On with the show. So I am doing this episode and it's going to be about food, but it's actually taking a little bit of a more serious tone. I mean, there's a lightness to it too, but there's a little bit more of a serious tone because of a couple of stories that I was following. And one of them, maybe some of you are aware of, it's about the James Corden, the Late Late Show segment called Spill Your Guts or Fill Your Guts. And this got a lot of coverage recently because there's an activist artist named Kim Sara who decided to take it upon herself to protest this segment because he features a lot of foreign foods. And I say that in air quotes because, people think they're weird and whatever, but he takes it to a different level, basically using foods, a lot of which come from Asia, and describing them as horrific, horrible, disgusting, all of the above. So this activist Kim decided to protest and say, this segment is not cool. This should not be run this way because it really does further demonize Asians and our culture and our background and our food. And so, as we all know, this last year and a half, and it still continues now, is filled with so much anti-Asian hate. So people, will use any reason to lash out and harass different Asian cultures and people. And so she decided that, right now, particularly, this is not the right time to be running these kinds of segments. Well, she started a petition and it took off. She has organized a protest in front of CBS in LA, but she got a lot of backlash from haters and trolls, as one would. And so it's been a really trying time for her. And I decided that, this is something that we should talk about because I started reading up on this subject of how there's this clear delineation oftentimes when it comes to different cultures and their foods and how they're treated, either with respect or completely vilified and treated as disgusting, inedible, how gross. And then the people, the culture itself then is stereotyped as gross and filthy and disgusting. So I wanted to talk to Kim. And then later on in the show, I wanted to talk to two sisters who had started an Asian food company recently, and it's really doing well, but they also wanted to break down stereotypes of Asian food and culture and also break down the MSG myth, which I'm going to get to later in the show. So this is all about food, but it's all about more about the way in which food can be used as a weapon against a culture or revered. And oftentimes with Asian foods, it's treated as something so disgusting and foreign and inedible, right? We've all had those moments as kids growing up, right? I mean, I'm sure a lot of us have, I have, of being made fun of because of the foods I eat and the food that I would sometimes get in my lunchbox, made lovingly by my mother. So yeah, this first interview is going to be with Kim, who, is kind of going through some things because of this movement that she started and then the backlash she received. So here's that interview with Kim Sara. Hey, Kim, welcome to the show. Good to meet you this way.
Hi, nice meeting you.
I know. We should mention that the two of us spoke at a rally in San Gabriel Valley, but we missed each other. We completely missed each other. So it's so nice to finally meet you. So Kim, I know that you are an artist and you're an activist and you're kind of turned into an influencer educator, right? On social media, which I love following you because you do put out some great information. So artistically done, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So tell me, did this come about by accident in terms of you getting into sort of more activism and talking about anti-Asian hate? Very much like me. I mean, that's my story. But tell me how you got involved.
Yeah, completely on accident. Definitely not intended. I actually started doing art activism work last year during the pandemic, mostly because we were at home all the time. But the second reason was because I was working a 9-to-5 job. And during the height of the Black Lives Matter protests, no one at my work was even mentioning the topic of race.
Wow.
And there were no safe spaces for Black employees. And I just felt really uncomfortable because I'm in LA and all around me are protests that were happening every single day. So in my off time at work, I would just learn about anti-racism, what was going on, and just wanted to express how I've been feeling through my art. And so I would post it on Instagram just for me. It was just a therapeutic way for me to get my thoughts out there.
Right.
And then fast forward to this year, it was a lot of anti-Asian hate. And my family is from Flushing. So Flushing is very predominantly Asian. So I really felt kind of, like, wow, this is really happening to my family, to my people. And it's kind of how I've just gotten into this whole activist Instagram space.
You kind of couldn't help it, right? We all kind of couldn't help but take notice, obviously. And some of us obviously went a little further to start really speaking up and speaking out about it like you were, and you have been and still do. So you are Filipina Chinese, right? Mm-hmm. Are your parents immigrants?
I'm an immigrant myself. So me and my parents all immigrated here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have the true immigrant story and of what this country is supposed to represent, right? In terms of the opportunity and the living the American dream and all of that. So tell me how you felt when you started seeing, like you said, it was your people being attacked and, harassed and all of us again felt this way too. How did that make you feel being here and sort of seeing this all around you and hearing about it?
Right. Yeah. So the reason why it affected me so much was because I remember growing up with my parents, and I didn't get to see them often because they were working to get the green cards, and they were working a lot of overtime. And from what I was told by my parents when I was younger is that they moved here to give me a better life, to give me more opportunities that we didn't get that in the Philippines. So I've really seen them work their way up and, get to a place that we're at today. But seeing the anti-Asian hate crimes that are really attacking, people who look like me, so not even just Filipino Chinese people, it's really just the perception that people have that, even like anyone who looks just Asian is getting attacked. Right. And it just makes me feel like I don't belong here. It
Yeah.
makes me feel like I'm not American, or I'm my parents worked for this country in this country for nothing. Because a lot of the anti-Asian hate crimes were based off of the whole weird false perception that we aren't American and we don't belong here, which is incredibly false. But it's very offensive to people like my parents, who really have came here for a better life and have worked their way up. So
right,
yeah,
exactly. Always being treated as the perpetual foreigner, right?
right.
So let's cut to what has happened with the whole James Corden spill your guts or fill your guts segment. A lot of us know about this, but just in case people are listening or watching, just quickly, James Corden, the host of the Late Late Show on CBS, he does this segment where he gets celebrities sitting around a table and they either have to tell something, about themselves. So it's like a take on Truth or Dare, right? The game, Truth or Dare. So if they choose not to tell some truth about themselves, then they have to eat something deemed as gross or disgusting. And I'm using air quotes right now because they oftentimes will use dishes from around the world, including a lot of Asian dishes. And so you were watching this segment and you noticed that he served up something that was very familiar to you because you would eat it as a Filipino dish, right? Yeah. So tell me, you saw this and you thought, wait a minute, right?
Yeah. So I saw the segment for the first time about 2 years ago or so. So it was a while ago. And the segment that I saw was him presenting balut. And balut is a Filipino food that I've eaten growing up with my grandma in the Philippines. It's very sentimental to me. And so he was presenting it to his guest. And in that same segment called it, quote, horrifying and gross. And when I first saw it, I wasn't mad like I am now, but I was more so shocked and very confused. I didn't understand why that was considered gross, because to me it just genuinely wasn't.
Right.
So now, just moving forward to just, I didn't speak up about it then because I think a lot of it was just me gaslighting myself and just feeling like, oh, maybe it is gross, maybe he's right. So I kind of just sat on it and let it be. But then moving on to this year with all of the anti-Asian violence and the way that Asian Americans are portrayed in the media, whether it's, incorrect portrayal or the lack of, I've just been studying that in my free time and came across this segment again and saw that it was still on air. And I just thought it was kind of ironic and funny, in a really weird way that it's still on the air after all these years. Excuse me. And so that's why I created the petition to hopefully just change it, or if they can't change it, to take it out completely.
Right. Now, did you think when you started the petition and your campaign, your sole campaign, that it would gain this kind of momentum because you have, over 46,000 signatures. And so you were gaining a lot of momentum very quickly and getting a lot of press coverage for it. Did you expect that? And when that started happening, were you concerned? Were you happy? I mean, I'm sure it was probably a mixed emotions, right?
Yeah, I was very overwhelmed because I really didn't think that so many other people felt the same way as I did. I actually got, I've gotten my backlash on it from people who I think just don't understand the significance of, Asian foods and how they're so deeply ingrained in our cultures. But about the press, I'm very, very grateful because a lot of the writers who were reaching out to me were actually Asian American, who worked at these companies, these media companies. So I'm very grateful.
Yeah.
That, but very overwhelmed for sure.
Well, it tells you something. Just that point alone, Kim, is that the importance of representation and the importance of people having people at the table, meaning in media companies, as reporters, as decision makers, because they get it, right? So they're going to bring this cultural awareness to covering a story rather than whitewashing everything, as we, have seen over many, many decades and centuries. So I know that you mentioned backlash, and some of the stuff that people were sending you were pretty horrible. And I'm actually going to read some of it because I think people need to know what people were saying, right?
Yeah.
So people were saying you're a crybaby, you should consider suicide. Another one said Asian bitch to go ching chong your way into eating some cats and dogs.
Mm-hmm.
This is some racist shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some really just mean-spirited, like beyond mean-spirited.
Yeah.
That comes sometimes with the territory of being an activist, of course, right? You're going to get the haters. But, at a time when things are so volatile and there's so much hatred, I'm sure that worried you. That had to have worried you.
Yeah, it definitely worried me. It definitely worried my perception of safety. And I don't have the resources, the power, and the money compared to, people like James Corden, who have all of the resources to protect himself. So that's why I was, very fearful. And it's also caused me to step back a lot with the petition because I don't think, or I don't know if he's ever even going to issue an apology. And at this point, it's just a matter of like my mental health. So
yeah. You do have to look out for yourself. I mean, you can push so hard, but as I know, being an accidental activist, sometimes the pressure can be overwhelming, and you really do have to think about like, okay, what do I need to do to take care of myself, or else I can't continue doing the work. Right. So I think that's, especially right now, it's Mental Health Awareness Month, right? So I think that's even more important to kind of, talk about that. So, okay. So James Corden hasn't officially apologized. Apparently he did say on Howard Stern's radio show that he will never feature these foods again because his show is all about joy and light, which I think he probably means, I don't think he's just saying that, as a load of bullshit. Right. Yeah. But again, it wasn't a formal apology, and CBS nor James Corden has ever really acknowledged to you directly, right, about this incident and about this segment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They have reached out at all.
Okay. So then how are you thinking now? I mean, like you said, you're stepping back because of all the backlash, and you need to take care of yourself, which I really do emphasize. But what have you learned from this experience in terms of everything from the way in which the Western world still sees us and our culture and our food and things like that, and also your actions and how that kind of has played out? I mean, what are the sort of lessons that you've learned so far?
Yeah, for sure. I think that this petition really just planted a lot of seeds in future, portrayals in the media. I think that what I really learned, because, his statement was definitely not an apology, which is what I really wanted, because I really wanted him to address the harm that it caused to Asian cultures or Asian people who still eat these foods. I think that's the most important thing. And because he didn't. And also one of my other asks in that same petition was for him to donate money to Asian American organizations, which he, ignored. So I'm also just taking it upon myself to create a fundraiser this month to, end the petition, because he is taking it down, but just end the petition and taking it into my own hands to create a fundraiser that would go into Asian American orgs and businesses. But what I really learned from this is that, as Asian people, the perception, the model minority myth perception that we are quiet or we are silenced or, we don't speak up about things that, matter to us. There are over 46,000 people who signed the petition. Obviously, we are loud. Obviously, we have a voice. And at this point, in 2021, I'm sure so many people have spoken up about things that, didn't sit right with them in the past. But this just goes to show that we are speaking up about these things.
Right.
And this is going to be a continuous thing. And I hope that this inspires everyone else to just call out things in the media that aren't accurate. Like, for example, another thing I had called out months ago was the Korean Spa Massacre that happened in March. Mm-hmm. And I remember being so shocked about it because I didn't see a lot of people in the media calling it a hate crime.
Right.
And I knew that a lot of Asian Americans, including myself, it was just such an obvious thing that this was a hate crime. And I was waiting for days for media outlets to do so, and a lot of them didn't. So I think that I hope that this just creates a shift culturally in the way that the media works. And, I hope it also gives a lot more Asian American representation in the media, like you said, these writers or the people who create these stories, because if there are Asian Americans who are creating these stories, I'm sure that they will understand, who we are and portray us in such an accurate light.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying before. It's the cultural
Right.
awareness and understanding that has
Right.
been lacking for so long in the media, in Hollywood, in education, you name it, right, across the board, and that's why we've been treated in this manner for so long, invisibilized, right? And so you said something interesting in the beginning of your story where you said you saw this segment 2 years ago, and
Mhm.
you kind of just like sort of, it was almost like a head tilt moment, but you didn't do anything about it and you internalized it. It's almost like you were ashamed, right? And a lot of
Right.
times we have been made to feel shameful about our background and our food. I mean, I remember growing up, being made fun of constantly. We all have those stories of the lunchbox moments of going to school with something ethnic in our lunchbox and the kids just like being horrified. So that is lasting pain and scars that a lot of us hold. And so when we see it projected onto a huge platform like CBS and the Late Late Show and been made fun, they're making fun of it, it's like PTSD. It like takes you right back to, your memories of being a kid and being made fun of. So that's why, you speaking up, as difficult as it was because of the backlash, it probably educated some people who maybe wouldn't have thought twice about that segment, wouldn't have said, oh my gosh, you know what, maybe that is offensive. Somebody wrote an article and they called it cultural chauvinism, not specifically to the James Corden segment, but the idea that some foods and some ethnic foods are deemed as disgusting, whereas other foods like pate, right?
Mhm.
I mean, that's goose liver. And the way in which goose liver is created is really horrifying, right?
Yeah.
What they do to the goose. But
Yeah.
that, for some reason, is considered sophisticated and cultured, whereas something else, is considered gross and, foul. So cultural chauvinism, I thought that was a really interesting term.
Yeah. And excuse me. And I was talking to some friends about this as well. And it was just such a, I haven't really read into it, but I think it is such an interesting concept to study about how, foods like escargot or just like European foods, they were never considered, or I mean, at least to me, they were never considered gross or horrifying, like James Corden says. A lot of what I've seen in the media, and even if you look into like last year in the beginning of COVID, there was this really the false myth that Asians were giving other people COVID because of the bats in the wet markets in China.
Right.
So we were connected to that.
Yes.
And it was actually proven as a myth. I looked it up because I was just like, and even so, it doesn't give anyone the right to, obviously discriminate us, but just these connections that people have with food and the people that eat these foods, it's like it's very weird to me.
It is
Yeah.
And there is a somewhat of a hierarchy, again, like we're saying. It seems like escargot and pate and even frog's legs, the French eat that, and for some reason that's a lesser kind of evil or something than again a lot of the Asian foods. A friend of mine had written to me after I spoke on this on Instagram and said, I get what you're saying, but aren't a lot of different cultures, they have a lot of weird, strange foods. And she's like, I may say, ooh, gross to the food, but I'm not saying, ooh, gross to the people, about the people. I said, well, yeah, you're more advanced than most people then, because by equating the food to the culture and the people unfortunately will just like say a generalization. Chinese people are gross, not the food. They're gonna be like, oh, all Chinese people are gross. And that's what we see happening. So
Yeah,
we
no.
gotta we gotta make that delineation, right? There's that difference. Yeah.
I think that's such a good point to hone in on. And I've gotten the same type of comments about, anyone can have an opinion on food. I think it's gross, and I'm Filipino. I think bolo is gross. And I think that's so valid. No one's saying that you can't have an opinion on food.
Right.
I think my whole thing is that James Corden is a white man, profiting off of our foods, like foods that are very specific to our cultures. And I think that's where and he's profiting off of it in such a negative light. So
Yeah.
I think where it's kind of gross to me.
Well, it also because he has such a large platform and an audience. I mean, I can say something is gross privately, to a friend, but that's not going to affect an entire, ethnic population.
Right.
So I think that's the difference. And so there's great responsibility when you have that kind of platform. And again, listen, James Corden, I'm sure he didn't mean it maliciously. I bet he didn't sit there and say, "Oh, I'm going to create this segment that's going to be so malicious and, against Asians." But now that if hopefully he has a better cultural understanding of the impact, right?
Yeah.
By you raising this, I mean, he commented on it. You have to be proud of the fact that at least Howard Stern brought it up and James Corden addressed it, right?
Yeah, I'll take it.
You should take that because if you hadn't raised this issue, this never would have been addressed, period.
Yeah.
It would have kept going. Howard Stern would have paid no attention to this issue. So you should definitely be very proud of that because, again, this is proof. One person's voice can be very powerful, if your intent is there and you're motivated and you're inspired by something. So congratulations to you on that.
Oh, thank you.
Well, Kim, I'm so happy that we finally got to meet and chat about this because I think it's so important. And I'm always proud of younger people. I can say that because most people are now younger than me that I talk to, who are courageous like this and are willing to take the risk and, speak up like you have. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll stay in touch though. All right. And remember, take care of yourself. Take care of your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health. It's important because that's the only way you're going to be able to keep going.
Yeah. Okay. True.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Okay. You take care.
Okay. Thanks.
Well, Kim, keep fighting the good fight. We need you out there. All right. So thank you for joining me on the show. Okay. So next, I'm going to introduce an interview that I did with the Pham sisters, Vanessa and Kim Pham. They started a food company called Omsom recently. Actually, they started during COVID, which is crazy, but you're going to hear from them as to like how they're doing, even in the midst of COVID. But they wanted to start this food company, even though they had no culinary background, because they wanted to celebrate Asian flavors and Asian culture and break down the stereotypes of Asian food and really bring life to it and color and be loud and proud about it. And in fact, that's part of their story of the name of their company, and they'll be explaining that in the interview. So they also, though, have taken it upon themselves to debunk the MSG myth. Now, MSG is those little white crystals that come in a bottle that like help season food. And that was very popular back in the day. But then because of an inaccurate report by a biomedical researcher in 1968, he claimed that he got sick from it and he got, all these aches and pains and things like that. It snowballed into everyone thinking that MSG was a bad thing. And it was, being avoided by the plague after that. And it was deemed as a China restaurant syndrome because Chinese food was, used MSG as well as other Asian foods. So that became this horrible stereotype that Chinese food as well as other Asian foods was really bad for you because of the MSG. And so people avoided it. People took it off the shelves. Chinese restaurants would have to put signs in their windows saying no MSG used. And even 50 years after this report came out, people still in their minds think MSG is bad. So the myth still exists. In fact, according to the survey, 4 out of 10 Americans U.S. consumers still actively avoid MSG because they still think it's bad, even though it is a derivative of seaweed. So it's actually a natural ingredient that then, of course, was made into the bottles that we see in the crystallized form. So the Pham sisters said, okay, this is bullshit. We're gonna debunk this myth and help continue to debunk the myth, because this is all part of the stereotype against Asian foods. So they're great and so energetic, and the company is doing well. But you're going to hear from them in terms of how they started and how they're doing. So here is that interview. Kim and Vanessa, welcome to the May Lee Show. So good to meet you guys.
Hi, May. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah. Well, listen, I have tried your product, Omsom, and I have some right here, which is your latest sort of collaboration with Pepper Teagan, right? We're going to get into that in a second. But what I love about this product is the ease of the use, of course, and that's the whole point of why you created this company. But also you wanted to celebrate Asian flavors and Asian cuisine and the authenticity of Asian cuisine. So, but I know you guys didn't really have a culinary background, right?
Yeah, we are very passionate, very enthusiast, but no formal culinary training. Yes.
Okay. So why then? I mean, the obvious question is why, because I know your backgrounds are a little bit different. Obviously, you have a marketing background of some sort, right? Because your packaging, the way you market the product, your website, it's freaking phenomenal. It's really impressive. So tell me why you guys decided to get into this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it really starts at like the origins, right? Like Vanessa and I are first generation Vietnamese Americans and daughters of refugees. And growing up, we really never, ever felt seen by this kind of quote unquote ethnic aisle in mainstream grocery stores.
Right.
I don't know if you've been to one recently. They're kind of old school, frankly, whitewashed. And
totally.
Seeing that, right? But then we're also seeing like the changing DNA of this country, where a third of the US is comprised of immigrants and their children. And on top of that, Asian communities in particular are really stepping back into our voice, reclaiming our power. And we just kind of saw that divide and we're like, damn, there's a disconnect here. And what if we could be the ones to fundamentally reimagine kind of this ethnic food category and kind of the right way? And so we quit our jobs about 2 years ago, like with that mission of how can we really reclaim and celebrate the multitudes that exist, not just in Asian flavors, but also in Asian stories.
Right. Well, so Vanessa, you and Kim, she just said you guys quit your jobs 2 years ago to go into this full time. How did your parents feel about that? Your Asian immigrant parents?
Yeah. I mean, our parents have always been non-traditional in a sense. They have been quite progressive in some of the ways they show up as parents, which has been amazing. But even still, I think what we saw was that they just didn't understand what we were doing. Yeah. And so because they didn't understand it, they kind of just like took a back seat, didn't ask questions. They're like, we don't know and we don't ask questions.
Okay.
They don't ask questions until we launched the company, which was like, over a year in the making, that they finally became really aware of what we were building and really proud of it. So now they're kind of like fully on board. But at the beginning, I think they were just kind of like, we don't know. They acted like it was like a project that we were working on.
Right. Oh, they'll get over this phase, right? Well, let's talk about what you had mentioned, Kim, about the fact that Asian food, people didn't recognize it. It was sort of like dismissed and all of that. And you guys are a little younger than I am. And so when I was growing up, of course, nobody knew Asian food except maybe Chinese food. That was totally Americanized. But besides that, like I'm Korean. So if my friends came over and they would smell kimchi or anything like that, they would be freaking out and thinking it was disgusting. Right. And that's how it was always seen. So I grew up being embarrassed to a certain extent about my own cuisine and my own heritage. So it's always sad to a certain extent for me to see that even younger generations still suffer from that you guys can relate to that kind of story as well. So I'm sure that was part of the reasoning also for you to want to do this, right?
Yeah. I mean, we grew up in a small town just south of Boston that I believe was 98% white. And so we had that, lunchbox moment that many first and second gen kids have, right? Of being a little embarrassed of fish sauce for us, right? Or like pork floss. I remember that, having a very vivid memory of that. And I think it's slowly changing because like we're seeing across the American kind of cultural conversation where it's not just Asian communities, but lots of other BIPOC communities stepping back and kind of reclaiming their voice. And so we have hope, but for us, like that is a big part of our founding story is like changing that narrative and removing a lot of the shame that we kind of felt and internalized as young people.
I know that you've gotten some great reviews of your products from different publications and different culinary, experts. And I'm no culinary expert, believe me, ladies, I do not cook very much at all. Like I always joke, like I use my oven as a shoe rack and, stuff like that. But no, I mean, I'm sure the reception has been pretty good. It seems from both the Asian community, but also the non-Asian community.
Yeah, we're really, really lucky to be. I think the reason why our products are so good is because we partner with Asian chefs. Like that was kind of built into day one of the Omsom business model, right? Is that for each cuisine that we build a product in, we partner with a chef of that background because we know, right? Like, yes, we're Vietnamese, but we can't tell you how to eat Korean food or Filipino food. And it was so important to us that we really honor and celebrate these cuisines with respect and with cultural integrity. And having folks of those backgrounds involved every step of the way is like the only way to do that. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that's why our products taste the way they do, honestly, is because we have folks who've cut their teeth in these cuisines, have opened restaurants, written cookbooks. Like right. They're the experts. They should be really dictating kind of the taste of our products.
Well, how were you even able to rope in some of these chefs to kind of work with you, especially since you didn't have the culinary background? You probably didn't have the connections, or maybe you did. So tell me how that came about, especially now with Pepper Teagan. I mean, she's a huge name, right?
Yeah, I mean, we at the beginning definitely given, we did not have a background in food. Like Kim said, we also didn't have connections at all. So it was very much just kind of the scrappy, like DMing, emailing, showing up in person and knocking on the door around like a late afternoon where we knew it would be quieter, like truly really had to just hope that, they would take a chance on us. And we were really lucky, our first chef that decided to work with us, his name's Jimmy Lee. He's the chef behind Madame Vo. Like I would say he took a chance on us. He's Vietnamese. And I think there was that connection. And once we kind of sold him, it was a little bit easier to then tell the story to other chefs. But no, it was a huge challenge for us. And it took a long time to kind of get them to consider, their time is so precious, consider working with, us who had no background in this world.
That is awesome. I mean, I really love the fact that you just pounded the pavement and just took that huge risk. But that's what entrepreneurship is about, right? You got to be able to take that risk, not knowing what the outcome could be. So are you guys beyond surprised by the success so far? I mean, when you started off, what were you thinking? And like now where you're at, what are you thinking?
Oh my God. Yeah, no, every day we pinch ourselves.
Okay.
We launched also right in the middle of the pandemic in May 2020. So like the whole world had no idea what happened, let alone us. And so the reception has just been beyond anything we could have ever imagined. Like we sold out, I think now 7 times. Eight times. We got on the Today Show a month after we launched. Like it was just like wild.
Yeah. Again, like you just said, you did launch in the middle of the pandemic because I remember hearing about you guys at that time. And I got, do you guys, your tambourine? I kept this thing. Look at this tambourine. Oh, and we should mention why it's called Omsom for people who don't know. Right? Because there's a reason why the name is significant.
Yes. So Omsom is not a real word, but it is rooted in the Vietnamese phrase Om Som, which roughly translates to like rowdy or rambunctious. It's actually a negative term. So growing up, and I were like loud little kids in the back of the car. My parents would always turn around and be like, "Oh, don't be so Om Som." And we this idea of really like reclaiming this rowdy, in your face energy, because Vanessa and I felt so badly that we needed to give a middle finger to this like model minority, submissive, quiet thing that Asian Americans have been flattened and erased with. And honestly, also it's a reflection of our flavors. They are bold. They are in your face. And so Omsom just felt so like right to us. And when we first told our parents, again, my dad was like, "Are you sure?" kind of a negative term, but now, they've come to really love it. And I think it's a little wink to our Vietnamese community of like, if you know,
Yeah.
So that's really cool to honor.
And I love that, especially now, as you ladies know very well, that the last year and a half, it's been a tough one for the Asian community, who has always been perceived as quiet and docile and not making any noise and not pushing back and not fighting, for what we believe in. And now that's obviously changing because of what's happened. And so it's great to see that your business reflects that idea of breaking the stereotype of the quiet model minority. So that's awesome that you're kind of using the business to also kind of reshape that narrative. So good for you, ladies.
Thank you so much for that. I mean, yeah, we get asked this question of like, wow, like, look at how good timing was for your business. And we're like, we have been thinking about this since the early 90s when we were born. What I mean, like, and I'm glad that the conversation is being had on a more mainstream level, but this has been happening for generations and decades. And it's honestly about time that it has kind of reached the national dialogue.
Absolutely. And let's talk about how you're also trying to break some other stereotypes and myths. And that is the MSG myth, right? A lot of people might not know about this. And I have to be completely honest with you. I really wasn't that familiar with the whole myth and how it came about. And the fact that it has been debunked, and yet people still believe that MSG is a bad thing. So where is that cute little bottle? Again, you guys sent me this cute little bottle of MSG. We all grew up with this as kids, but then all of a sudden, it became this taboo, right? And it was because of this scientist in the late 1960s who happened to be Asian, which kind of is weird. But he claimed that MSG was a bad thing. It was giving him headaches and making him dizzy. And it was because of the Chinese food he was eating. And that reputation and that myth lasted for decades and still does to this day. So why have you guys decided to take this on in debunking the MSG myth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you hit upon a lot of it right there. I think, Vanessa and I grew up with MSG, like our mother would use it, but even when she did use it, it was kind of like cloaked in shame a little bit. And I didn't really fully understand that, right? As a child, you're not understanding racism and identity and xenophobia, right?
And how that's internalized.
Yes. Ooh, that part.
Right.
And I think as we started learning about exactly what you said, the history behind MSG and how it's literally rooted in bad science, we wanted to dig a little bit deeper. And we found out that this like anti-MSG hatred, yes, was rooted in this like letter, right? And to this journal and all of that piece, but it also became a really convenient narrative for a lot of anti-Asian sentiment, right? Like this is a late 60s, 70s, 80s. This is around the murder of Vincent Chin. There's a lot of particularly Chinese sentiment happening in the US, and MSG just became this really kind of convenient narrative that could fit alongside this, Asian or Chinese folks are coming here and bringing their unhealthy, dirty food and kind of changing society and for the negative. And it's almost impossible to talk about Asian American food in the US without talking about MSG. Like they can't be first. And this myth has just been perpetuated, as you said, over decades, even though the FDA proved in 1984, I believe, that there is no link between these symptoms and MSG. And for us, we're just like, yes, we are a food brand, but we are first and foremost a culture brand. And it would be unfair, I think, to our proud and loud ethos to not talk about this, because yes, it's about a single ingredient, but really it's tied to something much bigger than, this ingredient. It's tied to Asian America's place at the modern American dining table. And so, that was like kind of the fire under our ass a little bit. We're like, how can we rewrite some of this narrative? And we're like, wouldn't it be bold to be one of the first products ever to proudly feature MSG as an ingredient? Yeah. And that was kind of the nugget that we started building upon.
Was there any hesitation, though, to do that? Just because, again, this taboo still exists, the myth still exists. And for you to put your stamp of approval on something that that a lot of people are like, oh, no, MSG, bad, can't do that. There must have been a little bit of hesitation on your part.
Yeah, there definitely was. Like we had a lot of hard conversations internally of like, we're putting our necks out there, because that's also one of our most kind of commonly asked questions when people write into us. They're like, oh no, do your products have MSG? I get headaches. And there's definitely a part of us that's just like, all right, most all of our products up until now did not have MSG. And we were kind of just like, all right, just say no, and like kind of archive that conversation. But then part of us also was like, if we keep getting this question, then there's a lot of people out there who think this way about all Asian food, right? Like not even just Chinese food. It's like, oh, all Asian food. And we just didn't feel good about building a company as proud and loud as ours without tackling that. And so, yeah, I mean, we've faced a bit of backlash for it, but I think the world is a better place when you step into your truth and speak it loudly. And so that's what we're choosing to do as entrepreneurs. It's hard though.
Well, I'm sure, of course it is. Of course it is. That's why you guys have to stick it out. But what I find it very interesting is that MSG is a natural product that it derives from seaweed. And a lot of people don't even know that. Because MSG, if people think it's a chemical, that is a man-made chemical that is horrible for you. So it's so fascinating how that has been so twisted and reframed for the convenience of, yes, making Asian food look bad or Asians look bad. And then obviously Western food look better. And you rightly mentioned in your website, as well as other articles I've read, that there's MSG in Doritos and other snack foods, like Western snack foods.
Right. And nobody's like, oh, Doritos give me a headache.
Exactly. Yeah. The Doritos, that shit will kill you before the MSG ever does. So, I mean, I think I find it ironic. So how has that been received then? Are you getting any pushback? Are you hearing from people? What's been sort of the buzz about the MSG campaign from you guys?
Honestly, it's been so good.
Really?
There's a very, very small percentage of vocal folks who are like, how dare you try and poison us? But like, I feel such hope to see Asian people being like, wow, like, thank you. I feel seen. I grew up with this. I felt shame around it for so long, but I carry it in my purse. Thank you for like helping me kind of tell the story publicly, which we are so, so grateful for. But what's been really cool is seeing non-Asian folks who did not grow up using MSG or knowingly consuming MSG being like, okay, I've never consciously used MSG, but this product is damn delicious and I want to keep using it. I'm feeding it to my families. And I'm like, that is where change happens, right? Is like, you get non-Asian allies excited about the storytelling, about the ingredient, about our mission. That for me is like really indicative of something greater than us. So I'm most excited about that.
Yeah, we got a lot of even screenshots of people being like going on Amazon or going to their grocery store and buying it for the first time, buying this because of Amsam, excited to see what this is all about.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. Or friends screenshotting and sending it to me. And it was just amazing to see that conversation really take on a life of its own. But I also will say, I feel like even Asian people didn't really know. A lot of people from the Asian American community don't know because our parents were raised on that myth as well.
Yes.
And we also got a fair number of members from the Asian American community like, thank you for educating me on this. I just always had heard in my household that this is bad, but I didn't understand, what was behind that.
It tells you how powerful, story shaping can be when it comes from the media or the press, obviously, and science, when it can be wrong, when it is wrong, that it can affect across the board. So yeah, no surprise that Asian Americans are also saying, I didn't know, because I think all of us were told this narrative that MSG was a bad thing, that it was bad for you. You had to stay away from it. So again, it's incredible that a startup like yours that's meant to, be fun and, about being rambunctious and all that, but you're also shifting the cultural narrative. So you guys are activists in some ways through your product, which is fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for saying that and really appreciate you kind of seeing our work. And for us, it's like, there's just a certain lens through which we view the world. And that lens is how we make decisions. That lens is how we build our values and craft our team. And in some ways, happy to hear that, but also I'm sad. I'm like, I can't believe advocating against anti-Asian myth is considered activist. Shouldn't we all be be doing, you know what I mean? But I hear you, and I'm just so grateful that we've been given an opportunity and a platform where people want to listen to us and bring our products into their own homes. Like, that is the greatest honor that we can have as founders. So,
well, I
yeah,
can
thank you.
tell you, Kim and Vanessa, that, when it comes to changing people's minds, or at least opening up people's minds, maybe, oftentimes it does come from something as, simple as food, because people can relate to that. It's universal, right? So there is an opening that food allows that maybe something else won't, right? Because it's a little bit more approachable, as well as entertainment, right? Entertainment is the avenue towards opening minds too, through movies and storytelling. So you're doing that in a different way through your culinary sort of introductions to different Asian cuisines. And it's opening up people's minds in a very fun way. I mean, come on, guys, look at this damn tambourine. I seriously, I was like, this is the cutest thing I've ever seen. All right, well, what's next for you guys? I mean, obviously you're continuing to put out new product, and this, partnership with Pepper Teagan, that's a huge deal. So anything more coming up for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, lots happening. We're like growing the team. Like, we're really trying to get Ensemble in more people's homes. And yeah, I mean, a lot of different things. But one of the things we're really excited about is to meet more people in real life. We want to be on more store shelves. So we're starting to prepare for that and think about what does that look like, and how can we continue to be a culture first brand on the grocery store shelf one day. So yeah, we wanted to see Ensemble in homes across the country be a pantry staple in the American pantry, which is ever evolving. And we think Ensemble can be a huge part of that.
Great. Well, good luck to you both. You're well on your way, clearly. But I always get so excited when I see young, bright, especially Asian females with such an innovative idea, doing well and going out on their own, like you guys have, and taking that risk. So I congratulate you for doing that, because that takes courage. It really does, especially in light of the world as it is today. It's challenging. It's divisive. There's a lot of conflict. But again, you are willing to do this work, and it seems to be working. So keep at it, ladies. Keep at it.
Thank you so much. I mean, that really means a lot coming from you. You're like the OG. You've been paving the path. And so thank you so much for like lighting the way for so many of us. Like, really appreciate it.
It makes me proud when I see people like you following suit and doing even better, and really shedding more light on our culture and our heritage. So that's what makes a difference in the world. So keep at it. And I want to keep tabs on you. Keep me posted. I love the product. I love this little freaking MSG bottle. Oh my God, I love it so much. So keep me posted on what you're doing and what you're up to. All right.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks. Yeah.
So, you know what? Asian food rocks. We all know it. And this is my feeling. Try something once. Okay, if you don't like it, then don't eat it again. But have an open mind about different foods, about different cultures, and just be a little bit more receptive to the possibilities that you may actually like something that you have preconceived notions about. But if you don't like it, that's okay. It's okay if you say something is icky and it doesn't sit well with you. And sure, you can even call it gross for yourself. But don't generalize and say the whole culture is gross, right? This particular food might be gross to you. Okay, that's fine. I find some things gross too. But I don't say the whole culture and the whole country and the whole history is gross. That kind of generalization is what gets us into trouble. That's what leads to the racism and the stereotyping and the ostracizing and the harassing and the hate, right? That is what causes that. And so let's try to keep an open mind, and let's try to be careful in the way in which we describe something, and be a little bit more specific instead of generalizing, because it can hurt, and it can hurt people. And we have seen it in the last year and a half and over many decades. So hopefully this was an interesting episode in terms of the work that people are doing and, the way in which that we perceive things, sometimes rightly, sometimes wrongly, and how we need to shift that perspective. All right. Well, I'm hungry now, so I'm going to go have lunch. Okay. So thanks for watching and thanks for listening, everyone. See you later.